A couple of weeks ago, I realized that for the past decade almost, I have been ignoring most of the Western animated movies coming out. I didn't see the new Disney films, I didn't see the new Pixar films, I didn't see the new DreamWorks films. The reason for that is quite simple, and it has to do with my strong preference to consume media in its original language whenever possible. And unfortunately, in Poland, the animated movies are all dubbed with local actors, and there is no option to see them in theaters with original voices. Now, my problem is not so much with the dubbing and the voice actors as it is with the translations. I noticed this a lot while watching live action movies in theaters with the original voices and Polish subtitles. I mostly listen to the dialogue, but I also do read along, follow the subtitles, and I have that instant comparison. And often there will be differences. Some of them are due to visible lack of context of the scene for the translator. Some of them are just mistakes, and some of them are simply idioms or jokes so entrenched in the English language that it's just impossible to translate them directly. Whatever the specific causes, I really just prefer to stick to the original and get as much out of the film as the creators intended me to. And that's why I've been skipping animation, because I was telling myself, okay, I'll just catch them later at home with the original voices. And I never really followed up on that promise. So now, with the new year beginning, I wanted to go back and revisit at least the most important animated Western movies of the last 2 decades. And I started pretty early with Toy Story, which I have obviously seen as a child, but I just wanted to start with the first Pixar movie so that I have the context for the rest of them as well. And so, as I already mentioned, it's the first not just on my list, but it was the first on Pixar list as well. It's the first movie done by that studio, and also it's the first feature-length animated film generated entirely digitally in the history of cinematography. And especially that last thing makes it a super important movie and gets it a spot in that history, because at that time in 1995 that hasn't been done before. There were individual digital elements in other films, but no movie has been done from start to finish on computers, because the sheer computing power to render the entire film was so large that it took Pixar a few months just to render the whole thing when it was done. And even that carried some limitations. Toy Story, for example, has no shots of explosions, despite things actually exploding in the story, we just don't see them. There are no shots of fluids either, and all of the human characters have short hair. And that's because all three of those things were not just difficult to animate, they were impossible. The technology that would allow to do them all in 1995 simply did not exist. And so, the first thing I thought going into the movie when I put it on was, wow, this will probably be a showcase of how far along animation has gone in the last 25 years. Because right now I got video games on my home computer that are capable of rendering in real time stuff that looks way, way better than everything Toy Story had to offer, and I don't have to wait months to see it. And indeed, you can see how old it's gotten. Some parts of the animation, particularly the human characters and the dog, look just atrocious nowadays. But having said that, I think it's still remarkable how good a job the animators have done with the toys. They still look and move and behave all right. And when looking at them, I didn't really get that sense of the film being aged so much. In fact, some individual things impressed me. One example was how light and reflections played on the transparent helmet of Buzz Lightyear. You can see that a lot of attention went into details. Wherever animators could actually do them right, they did. And seeing those little things made me think about the digital animation as a whole. Because if you stop for a second, you'll see that today it's pretty much completely replaced hand drawn animation, at least in the West. There's no more Pocahontas, no more Lion King, no more Snow White. Now we just get Frozen and Incredibles and Toy Story 4 just this year. And in my personal opinion, that's a damn shame, because I much prefer the traditional hand drawn stuff. Maybe it's because I see the limits to which the Japanese animators still consistently push it. I can see how beautiful it can look, but there is just there's something more alive in it than in the computer generated pseudo 3D movies. If it was my choice, I'd love to still have both types alive, and if I could only pick one, I'm sorry, I'd go with hand drawn. But seeing Toy Story now after the years with a fresh eye kind of made me appreciate this type of animation as well, as a different but completely valid type of art. It made me realize that you can inspire awe and joy here as well. And of course, that also has to do with the fact that the story aspect is so well done, because I've been speaking in purely technical terms, but even taking it all away, the plot and characters of Toy Story have not aged one day. Really, it's essentially a competent buddy comedy with both main characters, Woody and Buzz, having a journey of their own and a shared one between them. There's internal conflict, there's an external conflict. They both grow and change over the course of the story, and they're both remarkably fleshed out and more than one dimensional. And that's especially impressive if you consider the fact that this is an animated film aimed primarily at children. And so, because of the fundamentals of the story working so well, I was even more willing to forgive the aged animation. As it stands, the first Toy Story gives me great hopes for especially the following Pixar movies that I plan to watch. I think this one remains a really important film in terms of what it's done for the industry, but at the same time, a great movie in its own right.